Compañeros, welcome to another edition of the SQL Data Partners Podcast. I am Carlos El Chacon. It's good to be with you today. And in this episode, we have a special guest. We have Jean-Georges. He is going to be talking to us. We're getting outside our comfort zone, but in languages, right? If we mix a little bit of Spanish in here, or French, right? You might catch some of that today, although we promise not too much. But we're also going to be talking about something a little different, a little outside of SQL Server, and we're going to be talking about Spark. So Jean-Georges, welcome to the program.
Hey, thank you, Carlos. Thank you, Kevin. Also, this is great to be here. So yeah, I'm on my promo tour.
Very nice.
I've finished and we published with Manning Spark in Action, the second edition, a couple of weeks ago, maybe 3 weeks ago or something, and it's so it's fresh out of the printer. It covers Apache Spark 3, which is the latest version. So it's just a great moment to be there. And
well, awesome.
Especially if you've ever written a book, this is a fun part,
Yeah, that's right.
Since we're on that topic, my question I always ask anybody who writes a book: would you write another one?
Yes.
Oh.
Okay.
Yes, because my wife is not listening to the podcast right now, so this gives me a little bit of a delay. But no, it's fun. It's actually not my first. It's my first published book. But when I was because I was completely stupid back in college.
Weren't we all?
And I started writing a book in college, and we published. But at that time, we didn't call it self-publishing because I don't know if self-publishing was a thing back then, but
Sure.
I wrote a book on C and C++. It was among the college, it was really successful. I think every student bought it. It was also like they were cheap. So basically paid the price of the photocopies because we didn't go to a printer. It was very artisanal in many ways, many crafty. But yeah, so that was my one. I tried an ebook on Amazon, but nothing really that fancy. And this is my first published book. Yeah, so this is a lot more work for sure.
Yes, yes, it is.
Oh yeah.
It's roughly a 3-year effort.
Wow.
Yeah. It's not like it's 3 years you only work on that, but it's 3 years. It's like a 3 years project where you always have it in your mind. Every time you've got a minute, you're thinking, should I be spending this fun time with the family or escape in my man's cave writing a book? So. Yeah, so that's maybe why I want to write another one. I don't know.
Always a balance there.
Yeah, no, but it's a lot of fun. You learn a lot. I mean, it's like if you don't take it as a learning experience for yourself, I think you lose a lot. About
Sure.
how you want to communicate your ideas, how you want to structure your thoughts, and because it's always what I always say when I was talking with my editors, because if you open the book, you see all the editors. There's a lot of them. The process is really thorough, and Manning is really, really thorough, the process, and they want to have a quality product out of the door, and they are really they wouldn't let you go for a half-baked kind of book. I can list editors which are not that thorough, but anyway, so the first fun part is when you do the research. Okay, it's really when you're when you're in your chapter, and the way I wrote chapters is I try to find a data set we're working on, a real data set. I don't want to find something like I'm going to make up a data set myself. Okay, so which is always you've got always the most interesting use case. Okay, you made it to work for you. Okay, so
sure.
It's colon 1 with value ABC. Hey, that works with everyone. Okay, but then the thing is, so it was really about finding the right data sets that kind of illustrate the topic or how you want to teach in the book, and also that it doesn't completely overwhelm the topic you want to teach, right? It's not about, if you want to explain joins, if your chapter is about 30 pages and you spend 20 pages on data quality, on data cleaning before you go to your join, you're kind of losing track. But you still want to use a real example, because a real example illustrates left joins, inner joins, outer joins, all the varieties, cross joins you want to play. So that is also the interesting part. Then you write that after you've got your example, and that's where the fun part ends. Okay. After that, it goes to the editors. It comes back to you, say, "Hey, I don't understand what you're saying, but it's pretty obvious, no? Didn't you see it? It's all the words. It's English. It's my second language, but still." And then it comes back to you, and so you correct that. You send it back, and then they say at some point, "Okay, well, we need to send it to readers, right? We send it to early readers, reviewers." So you send it to early reviewers, and then they come back to you and say, "I don't like your humor. It's a technical book. You should not use humor in your book."
Wait, when did you get Germans reviewing your book?
So there's all that, and of course you've got the opposite side saying, "I love your humor. It's so fun it's so fresh to find some humor in a technical book."
Sure.
So, you've got to balance. I think it's becoming politics at some point.
Well, that's one of the nice things about it. Well, assuming you have the freedom, right? Your name is on the author page, right? Not theirs.
Yeah.
So as long as you're happy with with what you put out, then.
Yeah. No. And there's a lot of freedom from mining. Okay. So I made a political joke at some point, and they said maybe you should not do that. Okay. So that works. But they you've got a lot of freedom as long as you're teaching something that it makes sense. You've got
right.
There's a couple of words in French as well in it, so they're not that picky.
So we're going to get into some of this, and Kevin's going to help lead the way. Before or as we do that, we've done this a couple of times now, but we're going to give away a couple of books. And so we've got the Manning Spark in Action book. Admittedly, these are going to be the electronic copies, unless Manning comes up with a way for me to give physical copies out. But we're going to give away, so our magic number seems to be 10 copies of Spark in Action.
Wow.
So if you want to go to SQLDataPartners.com/Spark, which will be the URL for today's episode, or SQLDataPartners.com/203, there'll be the show notes. There'll be the information for today's episode, and we'll give you away. And again, right, first come, first serve. If you sign up, we'll make sure we get you that information.
I'll send the link to my kids so I get the books back so I can make money out of it. Stop giving free stuff.
There you go. Well, we'll hopefully Manning will hook us up there. So. But the book is called Spark in Action, and so Jean-Georges, it's great to have you on the program today. We brought Kevin in, but didn't mention him. But Kevin Fiesel is here with us today.
Hello, as always.
As always, that's right. And and so I guess with that, Kevin, you want to kick us off today? Oh,
yes, you'll
forgive me. I apologize. Just like me, to try and hand things over and then want to take it back immediately. Before we do that,
arrows.
Oh, you know what? I'm going to say that to the end. I'm going to save it to the end. I'm sorry.
Boy, we're doing it live, people.
That's right. Still getting used to this new format, so I feel like I've forgotten something. But no, we've decided to put it at the end. So, okay, there we go. Without further ado.
All right, let's talk about Apache Spark. So, since we have you here, what is Apache Spark?
Wow, we started with a violent question.
It only gets worse from here.
Okay. So there's the official definition, which you can go find on spark.apache.org, and there's my definition. Actually, it's not mine. It's I borrowed it from a friend, and I like to call Spark as an analytics operating system, and so it's getting very clear. Okay, so the idea is, as you process more and more data, okay, and most of IT is about processing data in some point. And you cannot run that on a single computer, okay? You've got to run that on multiple computers. So that's where the distributed part is coming. And then a lot of those applications you're building, especially with Spark, is really about analytics. So what's the role of an operating system? Okay, when you think about Windows or Mac OS, it's really the interface between your hardware, your physical hardware, and your application layer. Okay, the old times, when I started doing IT, I bought one of the first book I bought was the Windows API. Okay, at that time API standard for really application programming interface, not this REST calls you're doing everywhere. Okay, so basically you've got your API, your programming layer, and you've got your operating system layer, and your application is not using the hardware, it's using these APIs that the system is providing for you, right? And it's exactly the same with Spark. So when you want to build distributed analytics application, you're using the API that is provided to you by Spark. And so it makes that really an operating system for me. And it's dedicated to analytics and distributed processing. So that's my definition of Spark.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That's a definition I hadn't thought of, but I can see how it applies. So as an analytics operating system, what kinds of key scenarios would make a lot of sense for us to use Spark?
I use Spark like for almost everything as soon as it comes to data, except maybe storing or when you went to data. But as soon as there's some data movement, I use Spark more and more. So and it's really so that's really, I would say, just if we rewind and just not focus on my use case, but on most people use case, there is really two schools of users. There's a lot of data scientists, okay, because you can use notebooks and you can use Jupyter, Zeppelin, or whatever, connect to Spark and send your workloads, your data science workloads directly to Spark. And so you've got you've got the notebooks either hosted, you can run that on your Windows or Mac machine, and you can use that hosted. Okay, we were kind of mentioning Azure. So Azure has a version of Databricks where you just go there, Databricks being one of the vendor behind Spark, and you can go to Azure and start playing with Spark through the Databricks offering on Azure. That's one. IBM as Watson Studio. So you go to Watson Studio on IBM Cloud and you do all your analytics work on Spark directly. And there's a few other offerings like that. So that's one way. That's one way to use it. That's really, I would say, the data sciencey way of looking at it. And there's
You'll forgive me, right? So knuckle dragging Neanderthal, right? That I am, and admittedly coming from that, the SQL Server, environment.
Yeah, sure.
Can we? I guess I should have asked before we hit the record button. Are you using Spark in Advanced Auto?
Yes, we are.
Okay.
Yes.
So
I didn't say I'm a senior architect at Advanced Auto Parts. We have strong tie between North Carolina and Virginia based on that actually as well.
That's right. So I'm curious, right? So maybe in that sense, right? We talk about data science, and maybe just to help me connect the dots a little bit here, right? So again, right? So Advanced Auto, you're going to have you have parts, right? You have you're ordering parts. You have sales. There's sales information. All that stuff comes into a repository, and now you want to crunch that information.
Yeah, so there's various teams using Spark. Okay. So some and it's funny. I actually was talking about with a colleague of mine yesterday. was in merchandising. Okay, so basically he's using Spark to analyze merchandising information and do some kind of predicting information. Like I hope I'm not revealing any big secrets here, but
Sure.
is predicting what the stores will need in terms
Right.
of parts. Okay, so
Or how many bags of M&Ms I'm gonna buy, right, when I'm checking out.
Yes, exactly. Yes, because that's really that and wipers. It's really what we make our money on.
Well, there you go.
Hey, but we've got the die-out batteries now. So hey, you can get new batteries, especially as cars don't drive that much. If you need to change your battery, you can go to Advance and get a die-out battery. We've got so it's one of our brands now. But anyway, so that's we use Spark. That's a data science group. I'm not part of this group.
Sure.
They do other things, but basically they are and doing a lot of analytics about transactions. We've got a lot of transactions every day. We've got 4,000 stores. All this data is coming back. So we've got to, you've got to crunch this data. And really, Spark is not replacing, as we're talking, SQL data and SQL Server, Spark is not replacing this transactional machines, okay, these transactional servers. It's mostly after when you're starting to move data around, okay, or when you're starting to perform some analytics to predictive sales, for example, or predictive stock, and that's where.
So dare I say unstructured analytics, right? Because we have, like, I'm sure you still have a data warehouse, right? So there is a process, and for reporting and things like that. But I think, is it when you get into hey, I want to ask a question that I don't necessarily have a pipeline for?
There's a bit of that, but the thing is also it's not only for ad hoc reporting. It's also for regular reporting. Okay, so Kyle, who I was talking with yesterday, is building his report and is building his analytics in Zeppelin, and then he automates Zeppelin to run on a regular basis to build reports. Okay, so
it's still serving as some kind of like an ETL type tool, or there's some modification.
And you can use it as an ETL tool. You can have the thing is, we are in any industry, we're moving so much data, okay? Even if people don't want to move data, it end up moving data anyway.
Sure.
Or even worse, copying data with of course no alteration in the middle, right? And so we've got all this data being copied everywhere. So you still have the ETL tools, and that's where, as more like a data engineer at Art, I see also Spark running a very interesting role in to not at Advance, because I didn't do that at Advance, but you were mentioning also where did I use my first time as SQL Server. Actually, I used SQL Server at a company in St. Louis in healthcare, where their ODS was based on SQL Server. But as more and more people wanted to use the analytics, the data to perform analytics, they said at some point, hey guys, we can't let you just do select on our database. You're just killing it, okay? And it's a transactional server, so at some point,
sure,
sense, okay? So they tried, the traditional, let's have a read copy of it, but yeah, that works for 5 minutes. Okay, and so basically, what we were working on is to use Spark as an engine for copying the data. Okay, so basically, and a lot of industry I've seen, there's a lot of time you need to copy the data to make it available in read-only. Okay, you don't always have to rewrite it. So Spark is great for that. It's not, you take the data, you shape it the way you want, and that's an important step, and then you make it available to people that want to consume it. Okay, so what we were doing is taking data from an operational data store based on SQL Server, huge machines. They had the biggest machines they could get from HP at that time to run it. Kind of mono, you know, it's a lot of data, but I would say it's almost small data because it's only running on one machine. Okay, so but and then we took this data and made it available in the cloud, and Spark was great at that. So we used BCP to actually, we didn't connect directly to, we could connect directly to SQL Server, but we found out that the JDBC link was not as efficient as we wanted to, and that's yeah, it's Java and under the cover in Spark, this JVM, and so we use JDBC to connect to a relational database, and there we found it was more interesting to use BCP, get the things on CSV, and then ingest the CSV directly in Spark. So that was the underlying scenario. But what was interesting in this project as well was that because of all the applications and all the people consuming the data onto SQL Server, they could not change the schema. They were kind of on a schema lockdown, okay? Because if they had to change anything at the schema level, everybody was, you know, they would just get their gun out, okay? Sure. And you know, it's Midwest, okay? St. Louis we're talking there, okay? So it's serious. It's not this CC on the East Coast like we are. But really, so the thing is, so one way to one of the also the business goal of this project was to be able to split the data and versions of data. Okay, so not really the data itself, but the metadata. So you could have I could have version 1 of my schema on this data store, and as they were evolving the core data, I could keep the schema and then have another schema attached to it, which is a newer schema, et cetera, et cetera. So you are, as you're building your report, your applications, et cetera, you could pick which version of schema you want. Of course, we wouldn't keep them forever, okay? But you could have something like a V1, V2, V3 of the schema, and then based on that, you could actually make it more, you know, more agile in this way of accessing the data.
Sure.
So, and Spark is great for that because you ingest the data, you do transformation at scale. Okay, it's really distributed, so you really don't see the compute power, and then and then you reformat the data as you want. So in these cases, we stored the data in a specific kind of canonical format we wanted, and then from that part, we had other Spark jobs that could take the canonical data, the format, the data in its canonical form, and distribute it to the people in the forms they wanted. So, for example, you are in analytics. People in analytics, they love flat files because they love flat data, and because I think that, you know, as soon as they're doing aggregations, they probably are excited about it. So. Hey, we can pick on data scientists, right?
They're not here to defend themselves, so sure, right? Yeah.
So, but anyway, so the thing is, you because you could keep that, and actually what we do, we had a pretty JSON nested document, unstructured document, because we could add a lot of meta information as well.
Sure.
So, and then we could extract that and format it the way they wanted, and that Spark would also do that and provision and distribute the data in a provisioned database or a provisioned data store. So this is a kind of project you can do from a data engineering perspective, and that's where I think Spark is really great at, because you've got you can program Spark in whether it's Java, Scala, or Python. Okay, so where pick your flavor of language, and then you can start building your pipeline in something that is kind of a common thing. Okay, so you can standardize easily at the enterprise level how you want to build your ETL process, and so that's one way. see, there's two kinds. Coming back to your question you asked about 2 hours ago, there's really this kind of two use cases I see with Spark is really the data scientist doing all this science with data, really, whether it's just aggregation, I was kind of making fun, but more complex stuff with machine learning, deep learning, and AI.
Sure.
Or you've got the engineering, the data engineers kind of moving data around. I really think that Spark is, I've got a presentation where I show the tools that the data engineers are using and the tools the data scientists are using. And at the intersection of them, Spark is really playing a real strong role there. Such a SQL as well, by the way.
Yeah. So you mentioned three primary languages: Java, Scala, Python. In the book, I'm gonna tie a bunch of questions back to the book. Buy like a dozen copies of the book, people.
There you go.
So you use examples from all three of those primary languages, and I was curious, what's your feeling for the rough breakdown of how frequently you use which language?
So Python is probably getting to be the most popular one. And I see more and more Java, which kind of pleases me, and I'll come back to that. And then I would say Scala and R, because you also have R. I think the data scientist group is really moving. The more I see them, the more I frequent them, I see they are really moving from what they used to do in R into Python. So they keep their Python way of thinking, and they just use it straight the same way with Panda, with Spark.
Yeah, I saw an article on LinkedIn, right? And it was something about like quit using Python for every project. but the argument was that, it's so extensible, right? That, it was that somebody will build an extension or an integration or, what have you into it.
Yeah. And the thing is, I've been doing Java since version 1 of Java, and I kind of like Java, and there's a few things which I like Java over Python is its strong typing. Okay, so I think that strong typing is actually preventing you from doing a lot of mistakes. Of course, I love the interpretability of Python, so you don't have to compile everything and restart from this replay features, and that's why the data scientists love Python as well. It's because you've got this replay thing, so you can start back where you want, basically, in your program, like would be almost a debugger for Java. But when you want to build robust stuff, I think Java is probably my go-to. So coming back to the book, yeah, there were already a lot of books on Spark when I started this project, even 3 years ago. But there was two things that was annoying me. The first thing was that people were saying that if you want to do Spark, you've got to learn Scala, and I found that that's the stupidest statement ever.
Well, spoken like a true Java man, right?
And you like Scala.
Yeah. Well, Scala still uses JVM. No, but the thing is, you want to perform analytics at scale, okay? And that's kind of the value prop of Spark. So to do that, you've got to learn a whole new language, which is not an easy one. I think that's sending a wrong signal. Okay, and so that was one thing. And the other thing is, a lot of people were selling Spark like a bit like the successor of Hadoop, and because it was a successor of Hadoop, you had to learn Hadoop first. And the thing is, I never personally believed in Hadoop. That was maybe a mistake on my side, but the thing is, I came from small data, relational data, to I kind of, I went to doing big data in my career. I didn't even know I was doing big data because everybody was saying, oh, you're not doing big data because you're not using Hadoop. Okay. So I had several clusters with Elasticsearch, but I was not doing big data, assuming. So the thing is so I think that also Spark is that's what the book is about. Okay, you don't need to learn Hadoop to get into the book, and you don't need to learn Scala to get into Spark. And so yes, the examples, you will find example in Python and Scala, but the original title of the book was Spark with Java. So that's what I signed on with Manning, and they said, okay, well, Spark in Action, it's good enough to be in the in action series. So, flattered.
There you go.
So, yeah.
So as you were going through these, and you did end up using the different languages, were there use cases where it just felt a lot easier to choose one language over the others, assuming that you were equally familiar with all three?
There was a use case where it was not equally familiar, and we almost fall for Scala. I was working for a company in Durham, and we wanted to connect Spark to an API, and we wanted to get the data from in this context, a REST API. Okay, so specific format of the API itself, and so there's nothing like standard like that in Spark. That's not its goal. Okay, its goal is massive data. So when you speak about massive data, it's probably not calling through REST calls. But in this specific use case, we really wanted to call this REST API. The problem was, well, you can build your own data sources in Spark, okay? Like any, if you wanted to build your own JDBC driver or ADO driver, whatever. But the thing is, and you've got kind of description how to do it. And so I was the architect, and the team said, okay, well, let's do a spike on that. And they went on the spike, and they said, there's no way to do it in Java. We've got to do it in Scala. And I said, gosh, I've got this small team of Java devs, and now I've got to train them in Scala. So we've got this one functionality, which is going to be a nightmare to maintain after, and because we will not have to train every other people to Scala, and that's so I said, this is not possible. Okay, this must not be so. So that's actually I think it's chapter 9 in the book. It's how to build your data source in Java, and we found a way to do it. Okay, so it took us a bit more time to do it, and it was probably it was probably a more difficult route to go through to do it. But I think we had to go through it because otherwise we would have two code base to maintain in two different languages with skills mainly in Java. And the thing is, I also told the guy, hey, I'm going to train you in Scala, and then the next thing I know is you're out of the door finding another job. So, and the thing is, this is a truth. And when you look at the and why I say Scala is because Spark, we didn't mention that, but Spark is written itself in Scala. So a lot of people assume that, oh, it's written in Scala, so I'm going to use Scala, but that's completely wrong. Okay, so
yeah, no, my experience has been basically at least Python and Scala. The differences between the interfaces are so minute.
Yeah.
Now there can be performance differences, but if you're just thinking about it from development, pick whichever one you like better.
It's all coming down to the JVM anyway. Right, Python is compiled to bytecode and executed in the JVM. So it's all performant your compiler is basically, and there's a lot of optimization within Spark as well, built in, like Catalyst, which is optimizing your processes. So it's really minor, and yeah, I think it's not worth learning a new language to go to Spark if you're already familiar in one of them. So just pick the one you have and just go.
Right. Or use Spark.net and get C# and F# support.
I'm curious about it. I've got to look into it. I've seen more and more stuff. I've been in touch with some people at Microsoft as well, and I would be really curious about things as a F# is actually also using there because there's an interface with F#. So
I have used it. I've used Spark.net a bit, or .NET Spark, or however they're calling it this week, and it works all right. It's data frames only, so no RDD interactions, but that's not too big of a problem.
Yeah.
They are getting some community support for building in some of the, I'll call non-core functionality, like Spark ML. There's one guy in the community, Ed Elliott, who is working through implementation of Spark ML for .NET. So it's getting there. Performance-wise has been reasonably solid. I don't know that I would use it in a production scenario today. But as far as playing around with it and learning it,
they're really building a complete ecosystem. So I mean, adding other languages, if you find the support for people to do it, it's great. I mean, I love it. I love the idea of that.
Yeah, and like the interface difference is basically, in .NET we use capital letters. We use Pascal casing instead of camel casing, and that's really about the major difference.
Yeah, shocking. Keep using these French guys things like Pascal and things like that.
So one of the more interesting things that's come out of the Spark world in the last couple of years, in my opinion at least, is Delta Lake.
Yep.
What is that, and what benefit does that give us?
So and just to go back to the book, it's in chapter 17. Delta Lake is most of the data you're using in Spark is transient. Okay, so basically you start. A lot of people just use it as your old mainframe where you submit a job, it does something, and gives you a result back. So everything is kind of transient. So sometimes you want data to not be transient, and sometimes you want your data to stay for multiple processes, and sometimes you want to do transactions within those processes. And so Delta Lake is a Parquet-based database that sits very close to the Spark kernel. Okay, so it gives you a complete, I think it's now complete ASIC transaction, and it's pretty powerful in terms of features because you are really close to the kernel of Spark. So you don't have to. If I'm picking on if you wanted to do that with SQL Server, let's say, you would have to start a JDBC connection from your executors, and which from every executors, and send it to your SQL Server, store your data, bring it back when you need it, etc. So that is costly. The fact that it's very close to the kernel makes it a lot easier, and I think that's one of the benefits of Delta Lake. I've used it in some of the projects, and it's great because it's also one way to be able to have to create some data. The data in Spark is immutable by definition, so what's coming in is not really, well, you can modify it, of course, but by definition being immutable because of the distributed system, you can't easily change or tweak it. Whereas if you store it in some kind of staging database for Delta Lake, you can have all these things you want to do with a traditional database. It comes like after I've not used it in that process yet, but I was looking at it. The way I was looking at it, it was more like in complex pipelines. So you've got a first pipeline that kind of extracted data, consolidated, clean it, and store it, and other pipelines that get the data from this staging of the database and go further. So that's and then you get rid of it because you don't need it. But there's also a school of thought right now that's saying Delta Lake could be the next data lake implementation. So when you're thinking about building your own data lake, instead of going Hive and all this sphere of stuff in the Hadoop ecosystem, you could simply rely on Delta Lake. And it's right. Sparky files, so you don't you so even if you want to access the data from somewhere else than Spark, you can still use the Sparky files there. So it's not an interesting idea.
Yeah, this is true, and also the ability to do what they're calling time travel. I
haven't used this feature, but yeah, that's really interesting. I wonder how much space and things it consumes. I've got to explore that, but that's a neat new feature.
Yeah, I haven't used it in production, so I can't tell you how it works, how well it works performance-wise. But for SQL Server people, the closest analog to that is temporal tables, where I can say, tell me what this data looked like at a specific point in time. And it stores essentially JSON change sets of records. So it's kind of interesting looking at the files.
There you go.
So something we did not mention is I'm running the Triangle Apache Spark Meetup.
Yep.
And so it's a meetup about Spark. And Kevin has a talk soon. And I think, Kevin, you should do something on Delta Lake right after your next talk.
After Spark streaming, yeah.
Yeah. No pressure, by the way.
No pressure.
Right.
Why is it only on me?
Yeah.
Why is it about me?
It's the glory of being the leader.
Yeah.
You mentioned the Catalyst a little, just en passant, a little while ago. Mm-hmm. How does that optimizer help us as developers? What is it useful for? Like, how do I use it?
So you don't use it. It's built in. You can be smart about knowing its existence, but it's really, when you compare it to a relational database, it's really as you've got these optimizers as well. Okay, when you've got a query optimizer, that's exactly, it's not working exactly the same way, but it's the same concept. When you've got Spark is based on the notion of transformation and action, and I like to take the analogy of teens. I don't know if you've got kids and what age they are in, but mine, you say something, yeah, okay, go clean your room, go clean your room, go clean your room, and that's just a request. That's kind of a transformation, okay. But at some point, you've got to raise a tone and say, go clean your room, and that's the action. Okay, so at this moment, that's where Spark is going, oh, you asked me something to do, and that's where the action is taking place. And so Spark says, first, before I'm going to clean my room, I'm going to look at exactly what you asked me to do. Okay, so if you ask me to clean my room 5 times, I'm not going to do it 5 times. I'm just going to do it once. Okay, so and that's really where Catalyst takes place. It looks at all the transformation you asked it to do and see how it can optimize that. And because it's also going to distribute this workload to the different nodes on your cluster, that's where it starts to be a bit smart about, oh, I'm going to do that in this way. The way it under the cover it's stored, it's a DAG, which is a directed acyclic graph. That's just to show that I know an acronym or two, but it's really about creating a graph of the operations, and then it goes through the graph saying, hey, I can optimize this, I can optimize that in this way, etc., etc. Where you need to be a little bit smart about it is Spark is really super extensible, so you can have what you call user defined functions. I mean, everybody's got user defined functions in some kinds, and you've got also user defined aggregate functions. Okay, so those are for the optimizers, those are black boxes. So if you use a lot of them, or if they are mesh through your DAG, it's going to be difficult for Spark to have a complete way of optimizing it. So that's why if you can not use the user functions, it's better, because Spark has a clearer view of what you intend to do with your data. But that's going already deep in it. But I think that's a very smart tool we have within Spark to make sure that it's not going to work for nothing. If you create a column and then you delete it for no reason, then it's not going to create it.
Mm-hmm.
So some self-awareness there.
Yeah. I think it's pretty smart. There's another kind of low-level optimization which I really like. It's called tungsten, and that's a storage layer. Whatever you're doing, you're storing data, okay? And the thing is, if you want to store data, you can use a traditional way of using bytecode in Java, but that's really expensive. And so they decided to not leverage their memory usage in Spark by implementing their own storage technology, which is called tungsten. So it's compressed. It compresses the data. It optimizes the data. It's designed for distributed systems. So that's a pretty neat feature there. And once more, you as a user don't see it, okay? Because that's part of the abstract, on the underlying layer, which the data frame API provides you access to. So
right.
Pretty neat.
Great.
That is cool.
I've got like 500 more questions, but I think it might be time for SQL Family.
There we go. Should we do SQL Family?
We can do SQL Family.
Before we do SQL Family, I do have a few shout outs I want to give. For those who are showing a little love to the podcast, we do appreciate it. We've got Peter Shore, SQL handle.
Lonnie.
What's that?
Lonnie.
There we go. That's who it is. I couldn't quite get his name. I went to his blog looking for his name and didn't find the name. So thanks, Kevin, there so shout out to Lonnie. So thanks guys for giving us a little bit of shout out. And with that, let's get into SQL Family. So Jean-Georges, we haven't been talking too much about SQL Server. You did bring it up. So we are going to modify our first question and then say, and maybe you told us this story already, but how did you first get it started with Spark?
Oh, that's, I don't even remember really. There's this good friend of mine who so when you're looking at people and how they bleed database, I used to bleed Informix.
Yeah.
And I still think it's one of the best engine available. It's not dead. It's really kicking. There's a version 14 out there. So I used to be part of the board of the International Informix Users Group, and the president there came to me and said, "Hey, do you know anything about Apache Spark? Because these people at IBM, they are investing heavily into it, and I have absolutely no clue what it is." So that might be it. That triggered the question, and then you probably read an article or two, and then okay, I've got to try it. So.
And the next thing you know, you're writing a book, right? It's happens to the best of us. So now you've done a couple different things, right? But what advice would you give to someone wanting to pursue a career similar to yours?
Follow the money.
Ooh.
Yeah, it's sad to say. I'd love to be a little bit more idealistic, but it's really about that. Corporations really look at that. If you don't think money, if you cannot push your ideas. Okay, so if you want to, you've got to sell your ideas, and that's probably something I learned the hard way. I was an entrepreneur. We didn't go over my background, but I was an entrepreneur for a long time, and I was probably a bit more like the idealistic way and saying, oh, and French. So we say, if my product is good, I don't need marketing. Just find it. So you've got to have this business acumen, whatever you're doing. So.
Now, what's one thing that can instantly make your day better?
My boss saying yes to my new project.
There you go.
I'd love to come. I cannot talk about it right now, but if it works out, I'd love to come talk about it. And
there we go. Okay, maybe another episode.
Yeah, it's really a Virginia, North Carolina thing.
There you go. Very nice. Now you've got $10,000. What computer or technology, what computer tech would you be buying?
Carlos is mailing the check.
Yeah. We need to get a few more books sold, right?
Oh yeah. Royalties, they don't feed you that well. You don't write a book for the money. You see, coming back to follow the money, you don't buy the book for the money. No, so I'm an Apple fanboy, and my MacBook Pro is a little bit outdated. I invested recently into two 32-inch 4K monitors mounted there, so that's really nice. But I see that my Mac is a little bit suffering now, so yeah, I would probably go there.
There we go.
That's also a message for my boss.
Yeah. By the way, after you approve my pet project, I'm going to need some new hardware.
It's a budget item in the project.
Yeah, that's right. Nothing that the Apache Spark can't,
Hey, I'm doing big data on a single computer.
Now, what famous person in history would you most want to spend the day with?
So as we said, I'm French, and when I was a kid, I would definitely say Napoleon. Okay, so that's our big hero in France.
Sure.
Now, after all my kids brainwashing me with Hamilton, I switch.
Oh.
And since it's on Disney Plus, I've watched it like 3 times already. So rewatch it. I mean, it's. Yeah.
There you go, man. Yeah, so not French.
Yeah, you've got to open my mind.
That's right. There you go. Yeah, there is some interesting history, right? So ironically, before we got into Hamilton, I actually started showing my kids Les Miserables, right? And we went back to the old 1978 version, the movie, right? There was no music. Right, kind of get them for the story, and they actually got into it. They were quite interested.
It's a sad but well written story.
No, that's right.
So yeah.
Now, our last question for you today: what is your favorite ice cream topping?
So the thing is, I'm really difficult on ice cream. Okay, so it's really funny you said that, because the thing is, most of the time, even when we buy ice cream, and we've got kids at home, and everybody loves ice cream. I'm not that great of a fan of ice cream, except when it comes from one of the place where, and Kevin may know it. It's Mapleview Dairy Farm, and we're plenty of product placement in this podcast. It's awful. but Mapleview is a farm, like, I don't know, it's something 5 miles from where I live. 5 miles is far enough to not just go there, like, it's out in the countryside. It's dangerous over there. But
Could be rebels.
Yesterday I had an errand to run with one of my sons, and we stopped there, and it's just gorgeous, and especially as with this pandemic, where you stay at home as much as you can, and you just go out wearing masks, and you go to this place, and they've really well done it. The thing with different counters, you get your ice cream there. but I did not take any topping because it's so good. You don't want to waste the ice cream with toppings. I tell you that. You've got to come over, Carlos, once, and I'll show you.
Yeah, there you go. I'm actually headed down your way this weekend. Maybe I'll have to swing by.
Yeah, write it down. Mapleview Dairy Farm.
Mapleview Dairy. There we go. Well, awesome. Well, thanks so much for being on the program today, Jean-Georges. It was great having you.
Thanks, Carlos. Thanks, Kevin. Your questions were not that tricky. I'll give you $20 when we meet at the next.
All those product placements were worth it.
No, don't forget. Okay, don't forget.
There we go. That's right. Don't forget. From Manning's Spark in action. Oh man, now I'm the odd man out. You can pick it up if you go to SQLDataPartners.com/Spark. We'll have our show notes for today's episode, and we'll have a way for you to sign up. First come, first serve. The first 10 people to go will get you a book. And it looks like it will be the electronic version this time around. So Jean-Georges, if people want to reach out to you on social media, how can they do it?
I'm mostly, I'm on every social media, but I kind of, segment a little bit. You can find me on Facebook, but what I post there is completely politically incorrect. If you can find me on LinkedIn, but usually on LinkedIn, I only connect with people I have a previous relation or a work relation, not just random people.
Sure. So
but
hint, compañeros, say, I heard you on the podcast. I'd like to talk about
Spark,
right?
That's great. Or just write a small, just don't click connect for just the sake of connecting. That's right. Facebook.
That's the one downside to the mobile app on LinkedIn. If you are on the mobile and you click connect, you send it with no note.
Yeah.
Which is unfortunate.
And or Twitter. I'm daily on Twitter. JG Perrin, my initials, JGPERRIN, and I kind of find Twitter a little bit smarter in some way. So filtering a little bit more.
Less characters. Kevin.
You can find my contact details in Elastic MapReduce cluster. It's pretty deep inside one of the executors. You got to figure out which one it is, though.
You got to figure it out, right? That's the fun. That's the whole fun.
I can sell Kevin's information.
Oh man!
He's getting the $20.
You have to give the $20 back, right?
Okay. Or I'll shut up for $20. Yeah.
Hey, compañeros, thanks for listening for today's episode. You can reach out to me on LinkedIn. I am a little bit more open, I guess I'll say, than Jean-Georges on my LinkedIn, but I will probably reach back out to you. If you connect, I'm at Carlos L. Chacon. Thanks again for tuning in to today's episode. We do appreciate it, and we look forward. Thanks for being on the program, Jean-Georges. I mean, we hope, compañeros, that you enjoy those books, and we'll see you on the SQL Trail.
Data Partners.